Usually a pretty ballsy kind of guy, but this particular case, I'm riding a little nervous.
When we talk about television shows that connect deeply with viewers, Alaska, The Last Frontier always comes up as one of the most memorable and loved. This show was more than just entertainment, it was a real window into a lifestyle that many of us could only dream about or imagine. From 2011 until 2022, the Kilcher family opened their lives to cameras, and people around the world became fascinated by their way of surviving and thriving in one of the harshest environments on Earth. Every episode was a mixture of adventure, struggle, laughter, family love, and sometimes even danger. It showed hunting trips in the wilderness, long winters where food storage became a matter of life and death, exciting building projects where cabins, barns, or smokehouses were made from scratch, and, above all, a close family bond that tied all the stories together. But to really understand the Kilchers and why their show touched so many hearts, you need to go back before the cameras ever arrived. The Kilcher story begins with Yul and Ruth, a couple who left Switzerland in the late 1930s, escaping a Europe that was moving toward war. They dreamed of freedom, peace, and a life closer to nature, so they traveled across the ocean and settled in Alaska, on land that was wild, unforgiving, and full of challenges. They built their homestead without electricity, without modern conveniences, and without any of the comforts people in cities were used to. Instead, they raised their family on hard work, music, poetry, and the belief that living close to the land was worth every sacrifice. Over time, their land expanded to more than 600 acres through the Homestead Act, and they raised 8 children who grew up learning survival skills from the time they could walk. This strong family history is the foundation that made Alaska, The Last Frontier, so powerful. When the show began decades later, audiences were not just watching another reality series, they were witnessing the continuation of a legacy that had been built with vision, courage, and resilience. The patriarch, Ats Kilcher, became one of the central figures of the show. As the eldest son of Yul and Ruth, Ats was more than just a survivor, he was a storyteller, a singer, and a man who carried the history of the homestead in his heart. He had lived through a childhood that was often strict and difficult under Yul's rules, served in Vietnam where he faced trauma and hardship, and then returned to the homestead to raise his own children. In the show, Ats appeared as a wise, sometimes tough, but always thoughtful man who guided his children and grandchildren. He played music, wrote poetry, and showed the audience that survival in Alaska is not only about physical strength but also about mental and emotional resilience. His younger brother Otto brought another dimension to the series. Otto was the fixer, the man who could repair anything, build anything, and turn scrap into something useful. While Ats brought philosophy and music, Otto brought mechanical skill and ingenuity. On screen, fans loved his humor, his problem-solving, and his ability to make something out of nothing. But his journey wasn't without challenges. In 2022, Otto suffered a life-threatening injury when a cow trampled him during a snowstorm, breaking ribs and puncturing lungs. Fans were deeply worried, but Otto pulled through, showing once again the strength that defines the Kilchers. Even after recovery, he found ways to stay connected with fans, creating YouTube videos where he shared his ongoing work on the homestead and his creative mechanical projects. These two brothers, Ats and Otto, represent the spirit of Alaska, the last frontier, but the story also continues with the next generation. Otto's son, Ivan, and his wife Eve, became modern faces of the Kilcher homestead. Together, they showed how younger Alaskans can live traditionally while still finding ways to share knowledge with the outside world. Eve, especially, became popular for her gardening and cooking, even publishing a cookbook with original family recipes that helped fans learn to grow, preserve, and prepare food like a homesteader. Their children, Findley and Sparrow Rose, grew up on the show, making viewers feel like part of the extended family. Another key figure was Ats Lee, the black sheep of the family, who left Alaska to pursue music but eventually returned to the wilderness. Along with his wife Jane, a strong and capable fisherwoman, they became a favorite couple for many fans. Their story included highs and lows, from hunting adventures to heartbreaking injuries, like when Ats Lee fell from a cliff in 2015 and needed a long recovery. Later, the couple faced personal struggles that ended in divorce in 2023, but their resilience showed that even real-life heroes face difficult times. Jane, for example, went on to star in Bering Sea Gold, proving her independence and strength. Each Kilcher had their own journey, but together, they represented something rare on television, a family truly living their values. And this is why Alaska, The Last Frontier was more than just a show, it was a story of human spirit. Now, when we look at the Kilcher family after the end of Alaska, The Last Frontier in 2022, we see that their lives are still full of activity, creativity, and connection, even without cameras rolling every week. For Ets Kilcher, life continues as a balance between music, storytelling, and family. His memoir opened up about his struggles with childhood trauma and the lasting effects of war, but it also showed how he used creativity to heal. Today, Ets performs music, writes songs, and even works with organizations to support veterans, sharing his story to inspire others who have faced hardship. His wife, Bonnie, has also continued her artistic path. She paints landscapes, creates crafts, and spends time between Alaska and Arizona, balancing homestead life with her artistic spirit. She might not have had as much screen time as other family members, but her quiet influence and creativity left a mark on fans. Otto, as mentioned earlier, had to slow down after his accident, but slowing down doesn't mean stopping. Instead, he's embraced the digital age, running a YouTube channel where tens of thousands of people follow his mechanical adventures, cattle care, and daily homestead life. For a man in his 70s, Otto proves that learning and teaching never stop. His wife, Charlotte, continues her work with gardening and raising peonies, beautiful flowers that grow on the Kilcher land. She shares updates with fans on social media and keeps the homestead's agricultural side alive. Together, Otto and Charlotte remain role models for sustainable living. Their son Ivan and his wife Eve have taken their role as teachers even further. They run a website where they share homesteading tips, gardening advice, and even online workshops. Eve's cookbook has allowed fans worldwide to try a little bit of Kilcher life in their own kitchens, and their videos inspire families to grow food, preserve it, and live more simply. Their children are still young, but they are growing up with the same values that their grandparents and great-grandparents believed in: self-reliance, respect for nature, and the importance of family. Ats Lee and Jane, though no longer together, continue to live adventurous lives. Ats Lee posts videos and updates about his experiences in Alaska, giving fans a raw and real look at wilderness living. Jane, on the other hand, has branched out into new opportunities, not only on television with Bering Sea Gold but also in her work as a nurse and as a mother. She shows that even after personal challenges, life can continue with strength and courage. The Kilcher family story also includes less visible members, like Charlotte's agricultural work, Bonnie's art, and the extended relatives who carry on the family's traditions in quieter ways. What makes their story so special is that every person contributes something unique. When the show ended, many fans felt sad because they no longer had weekly updates from Alaska, but in truth, the Kilchers are still sharing their lives, just in different forms. Through books, YouTube, social media, music, and even art, they remain connected with the people who supported them. And while television shows often fade into memory once they end, the Kilchers remain relevant because they live authentically. Their message has always been that survival is not about avoiding hardship but facing it with creativity, courage, and community. The Kilchers have also become symbols of sustainability at a time when the world is thinking more about climate change, food security, and alternative ways of living. Viewers who once only watched the show for entertainment are now taking real lessons from it. Some fans started gardens, learned to preserve food, or even moved closer to nature after being inspired by the Kilchers. This impact shows that Alaska, The Last Frontier was not just a reality show, it was a lifestyle guide. The homestead itself continues to be a place where tradition meets change. From music festivals to peony farming, the Kilcher land is still full of activity. Visitors come to Alaska and sometimes take tours, learning about the history of the family and experiencing a taste of their life. And even though the show has ended, there's always a possibility of a return or a new project. Reality television thrives on authentic stories, and the Kilchers remain one of the most authentic families ever featured. Whether or not cameras return, their legacy is secure. Their story continues, not as a performance, but as real life. As we think about the Kilchers today, one thing becomes clear: their story is not finished, and it never really will be. The homestead lifestyle they live is not about fame or television, it is about survival, family, and tradition. What they show to the world is something rare, that in a world full of fast technology, consumerism, and constant noise, there are still people who live by the rhythm of the land, the seasons, and the work of their own hands. And that message continues to inspire, even years after the final episode aired. The Kilchers proved that television can be more than scripted drama or quick entertainment. For over a decade, they invited people into their real lives, not by pretending to be something they weren't, but by showing exactly who they were. That honesty is what kept millions of viewers loyal. Families sat down together to watch because it felt like watching neighbors or distant relatives, not celebrities. The Kilchers' struggles, broken machinery, food shortages, accidents, and even personal conflicts, were challenges that viewers could relate to in their own way, even if they didn't live in Alaska. The idea of facing problems together as a family, of relying on tradition and skills, and of respecting the environment resonated deeply with people. Looking at them now, each member continues to reflect those values in their chosen paths. Ats is still singing and mentoring. Otto is still creating and teaching. Eve and Ivan are still gardening, preserving, and guiding others. Lee is still exploring, and Jane is still proving her strength in new adventures. Even the memory of Yule and Ruth remains alive through the values passed down to their children and grandchildren. And of course, fans cannot forget that Jewel, the international music star, is also part of this family. Though she wasn't a main cast member, she often appeared on the show, reconnecting with her father Ats and her Alaskan roots. Her success as a singer-songwriter adds another layer to the Kilcher legacy, showing how art and resilience flow through generations. In the end, the Kilcher family is a reminder of something important. Life is not just about what you own, what you buy, or how fast you can achieve success. It is about what you can build with your own hands, how you support the people you love, and how you live in harmony with the world around you. That is the true last frontier, not just Alaska's wilderness, but the personal frontier of choosing a meaningful life. Even though Alaska, the last frontier, is no longer airing, the story is far from over. The Kilchers continue to inspire through their daily lives, their projects, and their connection with fans. Their example shows that even in the modern world, it is possible to live differently, to live honestly, and to live fully. And maybe that is why the show left such a deep mark. It wasn't just about Alaska, it was about reminding us all of what really matters. As you think about their journey, maybe you can ask yourself, what is your own frontier? How can you bring more resilience, creativity, and family connection into your life? The Kilchers showed us that the answer doesn't lie in comfort or ease, but in courage and commitment. Their story goes on, not just in Alaska, but in the lives of everyone they touched. When Alaska, the Last Frontier first came on television in 2011, many people were not sure what to expect. At first glance, it looked like another survival show, but very quickly, viewers realized it was different. It was not about strangers put in the wild for a few weeks. Instead, it was about a real family, the Kilchers, who had been living in Alaska for generations. What made the show so special was that it was not fake or overdramatic. The Kilchers were simply living their lives, and cameras followed them. Viewers saw them hunting for food, raising animals, fixing machines, gardening, fishing, and preparing for the long winters. More importantly, they saw a family sticking together, working through problems, and passing knowledge from one generation to the next. For 11 seasons, fans felt like part of the Kilcher family, but when the show ended in 2022, many were left wondering, what happened next? To understand the Kilchers, you have to know where their story started. It goes back to the 1930s, when Yule and Ruth Kilcher left Switzerland. Europe was becoming dangerous because of war, and they wanted a new life where they could be free. They settled on a piece of land in Alaska, far from towns and cities. Life there was not easy. There was no electricity, no shops, and no roads. Everything had to be built from scratch. But Yule and Ruth believed in living close to nature. They worked hard, raised 8 children, and slowly built up more than 600 acres of land. Yule became well known in Alaska as a leader, even helping write the state's constitution. Ruth wrote poems and columns, capturing the spirit of life on the frontier. Together, they created not only a homestead but also a family culture of strength, music, and creativity. Decades later, when television cameras came to the Kilcher homestead, people saw that this was not just another reality show. It was a continuation of the vision Yule and Ruth had started. The main faces on the show were their sons, Ats and Otto, along with their children and spouses. Each of them brought something unique to the story. Ats, the oldest son, was a musician, cowboy poet, and storyteller. On the show, he often guided his children and shared wisdom about survival. But his personal story was not always easy. He had grown up under Yule's strict rules, gone through trauma in Vietnam, and later struggled with his own pain. Yet through music and art, Ats found healing, and he shared that healing with others. His journey showed that survival is not just about physical strength but also about the heart and spirit. Otto, on the other hand, was the fixer and inventor. He could repair anything and believed that nothing should go to waste. Fans loved watching him take old parts and turn them into something useful. His wife, Charlotte, was equally important. She managed the gardens, raised animals, and even grew peonies, beautiful flowers that thrived on their land. Otto had a serious accident in 2022 when he was trampled by a cow, breaking ribs and injuring his lungs. For a while, people worried he might not survive, but he recovered and later began sharing his projects on YouTube, where fans still follow his work. The younger Kilchers also became popular on the show. Ivan, Otto's son, and his wife Eve showed a modern side of homesteading. Together they built a home, raised children, and balanced tradition with new ideas. Eve, in particular, stood out for her gardening and cooking. She even published a cookbook filled with recipes and tips for preserving food, so fans could try the Kilcher lifestyle in their own homes. Ats Lee, another of Ats's sons, was often called the Black Sheep because he had left Alaska to pursue music before returning. Along with his wife Jane, a strong and funny woman who once worked as a fisherwoman, they became one of the most loved couples on the show. But their story was not without struggle. In 2015, Ats Lee fell from a cliff and suffered life-threatening injuries. He slowly recovered, but the accident changed the way fans saw the dangers of homestead life. Later, personal difficulties led Ats Lee and Jane to divorce in 2023, but both have continued to live adventurous lives. Ats Lee shares his wilderness experiences on YouTube, while Jane went on to join the show bearing sea gold and continues to inspire fans with her independence and strength. Other family members, like Bonnie, Ats's wife, added their creative touch through painting and crafts, while Charlotte kept the gardens alive, and Jewel, Ats's daughter, brought international fame as a singer-songwriter, occasionally returning to the homestead to reconnect with her roots. Even though the Discovery Channel ended Alaska, The Last Frontier quietly in 2022, the Kilcher family story did not stop. They may not be on television every week, but they are still living, working, and sharing their lives. Ats continues to perform music and speak about healing and resilience. Otto shares his skills online, showing people that even in his 70s, he is still building and creating. Ivan and Eve run an online platform for homesteading, teaching others how to live more sustainably. Ats Lee and Jane have gone their separate ways, but both continue to share their journeys with fans. What made the show powerful was not only the adventures or the survival challenges but also the lessons it gave. Viewers learned that family, resilience, and creativity are more important than comfort. They saw that life in Alaska is not about escaping work but about embracing it. And perhaps most importantly, the Kilchers reminded us that we can live differently, closer to nature, with more purpose, and with stronger family connections. Today, fans still follow the Kilchers through YouTube, social media, books, and music. The homestead remains alive with gardening, peony fields, and family traditions. Even without cameras, the Kilchers live their message: survival, family, and legacy. Their story shows that the last frontier is not only Alaska's wilderness but also the choice to live a life of meaning in a world that often forgets the simple things. When Alaska, The Last Frontier began in 2011, it quickly became one of the most loved shows on television. For 11 seasons, viewers followed the Kilcher family as they lived and worked on their homestead near Homer, Alaska. This was not just another reality show, it was a real look into the lives of a family that had been surviving in Alaska for generations. The Kilchers hunted for food, built cabins, raised animals, fished, and stored supplies to make it through long winters. But what touched fans most was the way they stuck together, teaching skills, sharing music, and supporting each other through struggles. The story of the Kilchers began long before television. In the 1930s, Yule and Ruth Kilcher left Switzerland and settled on wild land in Alaska. They wanted freedom, peace, and a life close to nature. Life on the homestead was hard, there were no roads, no electricity, and no stores nearby. Still, they raised 8 children and taught them how to survive by working with the land. Over time, they built more than 600 acres of homestead, and the family's values of strength, music, and tradition were passed down through the generations. On the show, the two brothers Ats and Otto became central figures. Ats, the oldest son, was the storyteller and musician, often sharing lessons with his children and grandchildren. His life had not been easy, he faced a strict childhood and later the trauma of Vietnam, but he used music and creativity to heal. Otto, on the other hand, was the mechanic and problem solver. He could repair anything and often showed viewers how to turn old parts into something useful. His wife, Charlotte, added her skills in gardening and raising animals, making sure the family had food and beauty on their land. The next generation also made their mark. Ivan, Otto's son, and his wife Eve showed teamwork as they built their own homestead. Eve became known for her gardening and cooking, even publishing a cookbook filled with family recipes. Ats Lee, Ats's son, was seen as the adventurous, black sheep. With his wife Jane, a former fisherwoman, they became one of the most loved couples on the show. Their story included hardship too. Ats Lee was badly injured in a fall in 2015, and later he and Jane divorced in 2023. Even so, both continue to live boldly, with Ats Lee sharing his wilderness life on YouTube and Jane starring in Bering Sea Gold. When the show ended in 2022, fans were sad, but the Kilchers did not disappear. Ats continues to perform music and speak about healing. Otto shares projects on YouTube, while Charlotte still cares for the gardens. Ivan and Eve teach homesteading online, inspiring families to grow their own food. Each member carries on the Kilcher legacy in their own way. The message of the Kilchers remains powerful: survival is not just about strength, but about family, resilience, and creativity. Even without cameras, their lives remind us that the last frontier is not only Alaska's wilderness, it is the choice to live with meaning, courage, and connection.